Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar with the Indiana Youth Institute. We're going to wait just a minute or so as more people filter in. Thank you for joining us today. Get started in just a few seconds. All right. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Indiana Youth's webinar, Coping with Criticism, College Life from Students of Color. I'll be your host today. My name is Nathan Four. I am the Programs Officer of our College Career and Counseling Initiative at the Indiana Youth Institute. We are so glad you've joined us for today's presentation. We are grateful to have a chance to connect as a community of Indiana youth workers that remain committed to meeting the needs of our youth and our children. For those who are not familiar with IYI, or the Indiana Youth Institute, our mission is to improve the lives of all Indiana children by strengthening and connecting the people, organizations, and communities that are focused on kids and youth. Listed here, you can see the values that drive the work that we do for Indiana youth. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few pointers that will help you engage in today's webinar. For technical support issues, please use the chat feature to send a message to Erin Whitcomb, the IYI registration manager. She's behind the scenes and ready to assist you. Use this feature to converse with the group as well. We will send a PDF of the slides to all the participants after today's webinar. We also encourage you to ask questions. So please use the Q&A feature for any you have, and we will get to those as many as possible. Feel free to also upvote great questions to the top. We will save time at the end of today's presentation to make sure that all questions are answered or have been addressed. Later today, you will receive an email with a link to complete an evaluation on this webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know what you thought of today's presentation. And if you do not receive the evaluation email, please check your junk email because it may have been directed there. Once you complete the evaluation, you'll be redirected for your certificate of participation. Like all IYI's webinars, today's webinar will be posted on our website. If you would like to revisit a portion later or share the opportunity to listen with your partners. As youth supporters of youths on their journey to college, our goal has never been for our youths to be admitted to college. The goal is for them to excel in college, to graduate college. And today we're going to dive deeper into the connection between belonging and academic success for students of color on our college campuses. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Michael Whiteside. Michael is a passionate mental health professional. He's dedicated to empowering others to see their potential as they live out their dreams. He's an experienced clinician. He has served as an intensive outpatient program manager, clinical liaison, and business developmental specialist during his time with Bloomington Meadows Hospital. He is currently pursuing his PhD in clinical social work, in addition to working as a multicultural outreach coordinator and mental health specialist for Indiana University Counseling and Psychological Services, as well as one of the general partners of Reclaiming Royalty. So without further ado, I'll pass along to Michael, and we'll welcome him to today's webinar.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to IYI for just giving me this opportunity. And I'm very passionate to speak on multicultural mental health, especially all of the various challenges that a lot of our students are experiencing. So I'll be speaking a lot on my clinical practice, as well as what I've seen both as a student at a PWI, as well as what a lot of my students are communicating back to me during a lot of our clinical sessions. And again, this is Coping with Criticism, College Life from Students of Color. A little bit about the aims and initiatives for this. We are going to identify barriers for having a sense of belonging on campus for students of color. We're going to explore the connection between a lack of belonging and academic performance. We will also talk about how to identify solution-oriented steps to really increase that sense of belonging for students of color? So the first thing I want to do is really dive into, well, what does it mean to have a sense of belonging? It's a common phrase that we hear from so many different people, and we hear it oftentimes in society, but we don't actually really process what does it mean to truly belong. So the definition that I found that I really liked is the sense of belongingness is also known as the need to belong, referring to a human emotional need to affiliate with and be accepted by members of a group. And if we really break that down, we're talking about what does it mean to have in-group membership, meaning to be accepted, to be acknowledged, to be seen, and to be emotionally felt in a way in which you have the awareness that you are not by yourself, but with another person. That also connects to emotional safety. How do I feel safe enough to be my authentic self, to really show up in this space and to truly be everything that I feel that I am, even in the midst of different challenges, adversities? Do I trust my community? Is my environment built to hold all of me, essentially? And lastly, the biggest one that we don't talk enough about is survival. How will I survive this experience, both socially, mentally, emotionally, physically? How much of me is safe enough to show? And what does it look like for me to show all of that? So let's start off with, what does it mean to be a student of color on a predominantly white institution, or PWI? It's really about feeling this sense of difference, being known as a minority. But if we really break down what does it mean to be a minority, it's this lack of representation. But when you think about it, it's not just amongst peers, it's with faculty, it's with staff, it's with the entire university-wide experience. I don't see people that look like me. I don't hear people that talk like me. I don't feel as though I have the same, not just opportunity, but connection to campus. So when you also think about what does this mean culturally, it's culturally and visually isolating, meaning that there's a lack of connection. There's a lack of cultural practices that are shared amongst the overall student body, which also affects the way that students are able to connect in the classroom, or even able to just feel some sort of deep longing to continue to be in this environment, which isn't necessarily culturally affirming to either the individual or the overall culture in itself, meaning what are the cultural practices, beliefs, and overall customs that really contribute to how I see myself and how I define the person that I am. And then when you think about that on a deeper level, it also creates this very anxious and very, very much aware perspective or sense of feeling for these students. And for the purpose of this, I often like to use the definition that anxiety at a base level, a base understanding, is really about being in a condition where things are not making sense. It's about being so overwhelmed because you can't quite process the challenge in front of you. And when we think about stress, which all this connects, stress is your subjective response to being in this condition where things are not making sense. Depression is all about when you begin to lose hope that you'll be able to get out of this condition where things are not making sense. So if you think about all the different traumas, all the different challenges that have led you up to this point that have happened all throughout your life, it's really about, how do I feel like I can respond? I have all these expectations. I have all this pressure, and I become debilitated, or I become stuck because I can't quite figure out how to move forward, how to continue. So you become painfully aware of the difference and really the concerns about safety of that difference. What's going to happen to me if too much of my difference becomes overwhelming or becomes isolating or ostracizing? What happens to me, and how do I lose myself? What negotiations do I make as a person and as an individual so I can exist both in this classroom, in this campus, and in this city that is likely to be away from all the things that have kept me safe the majority of my life.
Michael, do you notice a time when students are feeling most vulnerable? Is there a time that you see a certain grade level or a certain time of the year? Or when do you see students feeling this anxiety or cultural isolation the most?
Great question. And I would say, honestly, freshman year. So the first year that they're on campus, and oftentimes in the fall. The fall, both, and I can speak to this too personally, was one of the hardest semesters, not because of the academic rigor, which is what many people and support professionals assume, but it's actually because I'm in this harsh adjustment phase. So many things are so different from home, right? Adjusting to college, if we all think about it, was already an adjustment in terms of the academic rigor, but now we're also bringing in the social rigor for a lot of students who are from predominantly, I'll say, for example, African-American or environments that are more culturally populated, meaning there's a lot more people that look like me in my hometown. This may be the first time that I'm even aware that I am a minority. For so many of the students that I see, they can literally be from cities in Indiana and say, hey, this is the first time that I am a minority. I didn't really know emotionally what that meant until I came here. So now I don't feel like I belong. I don't see people that look like me. I'm having a hard time maybe adjusting to some of the academic rigor in terms of moving from specific details to more conceptual thinking. I don't know what the social norms are because nothing's really aligning 100% with the way it was at home or in my city or in my cultural group. And now I'm having to constantly search. I'm in these large environments. So many of the students that you see in this picture have shared, I'm the only person that looks like me in my class, and the class is with 100 people. Or it is a smaller class of 30 people, and I'm still the only one. Nobody talks like me. I make a joke, nobody laughs. It's that harsh introduction that really makes students question, is this the right campus? Is this really for me? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think that context makes it very powerful. When you talk about, how do I emotionally process the first time that I've been a minority in the situation, it's something I think that maybe people take for granted. And I think that really provides a very powerful context to where these emotions could come from.
Good, great question. So some common barriers, and this is me and my lovely wife, who is the other general partner for Reclaiming Royalty. We actually, our city had a Black History Month kickoff, and what you see behind us is what we will call the 8 dimensions of wellness. So 8 pillars that really summarize what does it mean for a person to be overall and holistically well and be able to thrive in their environment. So when I think about what are the common barriers for a lot of our students, you have culturally invalidating experiences on campus and in the classroom. For example, and when I say culturally invalidating, one of the misconceptions is that when people come to therapy, just using therapy as an example, they're ready to talk, or they at least know how to talk about their emotions. Well, what if I come from a culture where I know how to maybe express myself, but I don't know how to intellectually express the emotions because I come from a cultural background that historically and systematically oppresses the sharing of emotions, because later on, generations ago, which is not that far or that long ago, actually could lead to that person's death or that person's annihilation, if you will. So just a small tangent to give more context, historically speaking, I'll speak on African-American culture and what I've seen with a lot of students. They know how to express themselves in terms of their ideas, but expressing emotions is extremely terrifying because you already feel like a minority. Can you afford another strike against you when you have been told generation to generation, 3 strikes and you're out, and you already feel that you're 2 strikes because 1, you don't look like anybody else, so you stand out. If you mess up, it's easy to be seen. 2, there's already different stigmas, stereotypes, systematic racism, oppression, and different things like that already make you feel like you're already ostracized. But it's an experience that maybe other students from other nationalities or who are a part of the racial majority don't have to deal with. So because of that, can I really afford now to express my frustration or ask for help with the teacher? Will I be seen as weak? How will this lead to my overall rejection, which means I won't be able to continue in the program or the class? Or will it cause me to lose chances for upward mobility? If you think about scholarships, if you think about internships, all the different things I need to make a life and a living, both for me as an individual and for my future family. Essentially, this is some risky stuff. There's a lot that goes into this. And so if I'm not used to expressing my emotions because I've been taught by my family, even if you go all the way back to thinking even about slavery and how just terrifying it was for people of color, especially Africans, to speak their emotions without necessarily being targeted or being physically annihilated. That gets passed down from one perspective. And now you have groups of people who can express the emotion, but can't necessarily verbally express it. And if that's the expectation, think about how they can put them in this very powerless and vulnerable state. So if college is asking you to do these things, or if you have, say, kinetic learners, because I come from a culture that is more performance-based, meaning I am a kinetic learner. I learn by doing, performing, and speaking. But you're asking me to write a paper. And if I can't make that connection, or I don't have a teacher who's able to help show me how to make those connections, well, then guess what? Everything that has been helping me to get to this point now is not helpful. I'm left vulnerable and I can't move forward. So now I feel stuck. So it's very culturally invalidating. And then when you think about that as invalidating, think about how that also breeds this disconnection, excuse me, to the campus and the overall community. Well, everybody else is thriving. What's wrong with me? I turn inward.
Yeah, Michael, it makes me kind of think of the overall lift of a new college student. Before they're even thinking about the academics or how well they're doing in class, they're already, trying to address these needs that they're feeling. Let alone the pressure of the classroom demands that even haven't occurred yet. So I can really see how quickly that would mount on a student's shoulders.
Mm-hmm. And this is just and Nate, you said it best. This is just the mental weight. We haven't even talked about writing the first paper. And again, imagine all this is being felt and experienced, and it's just the first semester. I got at least 3 more years and a semester to go. So think about that as the lack of disconnection or the lack of connection to campus and the community, the lack of willingness to embrace the difference. And understandably so, right? So many professors have so many students. Sometimes it's hard to think outside of the box. But again, that's the challenge of being a minority. Your voice may not hold the same weight, so it may not get the same attention. So you think about this fear of lack of opportunities for building emotional safety. There's a lack of history-informed education. For example, how many of us, if we're being honest, had a professor who incorporated people of color as authors on the syllabi? Probably not many of us. And so if I don't even get to see myself in the reading, how in the world am I going to express an emotional experience or intellectual experience that is causing so much challenge, no matter how intellectually bright I am? And so there's not necessarily this curiosity. Now, when you think about how this affects, think about how much you're feeling. So it causes this internal conflict about self-image. For so many people, when things can't be solved externally and it seems like everybody else is able to get it, everybody else is able to make the jump, well, then what do we teach? We teach all the time. It must be me. Why? Because I'm the common denominator. But sometimes being the common denominator doesn't necessarily mean you're the problem, but it does, unfortunately, cause us to turn inward, meaning I no longer see myself as capable. I no longer have this identity, which most of the students I see were academically achieving. They were 3.9, 4.0 students back in high school where they had environments that were culturally affirming. So I hold this identity that this is who I am, but now I come to this big university, which I've been preparing for the last 12 years of my life. And now my identity is crushed. So think about this anxiety, which again, being in a condition where things are not making sense. I've been told that I'm smart. I feel like I'm smart, but my professors I keep getting bad grades. I'm going to study tables. I'm doing all the things, but nothing's working. So think about how that increases anxiety. And when that anxiety increases, it actually limits the mental capacity to take in new information. And we know from a social psychology perspective, information is better recalled, meaning test, when it's recalled in the same way that it was stored. But if I'm a kinetic learner and I'm not learning in the same way, how can I likely recall this information for the test?
Michael, a lot of students are talking more about imposter syndrome and that feeling that they're, everyone else is doing so well around them, and they don't really fit on campus. Is this kind of where that feeling is coming from?
Absolutely. Imposter syndrome is 100% what this is connected to. And imposter syndrome really can be watered down to, hey, you know what? I'm really socially anxious. For my clinicians in the room, that simply means that I'm terrified of being negatively evaluated. I don't feel like I belong because the environment no longer seems like it can hold all of me. So I must be the problem. And so I will continue to avoid situations that I'm actually qualified for. I tell my students all the time, you cannot take a test that you yourself are not qualified for. And what I mean by that is, to get into the room to take the test, you have to be qualified enough to register, meaning you have the gifts and talents. We just have to open up that capacity to pour it out and recall everything that you've been working on. And that's exactly the mental and emotional fatigue they feel. So lower self-efficacy, they don't have that belief. Self-confidence is shook. Great questions. And then let's talk about this again, this classroom perspective. So this really causes students to feel very hypervigilant, very self-conscious. Why? Because I have this internalized terror of being annihilated, being thrown out, being rejected, being exhausted. I don't feel like I belong. And so what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family? Right? Even as I'm talking, you can hopefully feel the emotional anxiety that they are experiencing. And then when you also add what is called a racial melancholia, so part of my background is I speak from a psychodynamic lens, specifically self-psychology, and Sigmund Freud came up with this idea of melancholia, which is this unresolvable grief. It's mourning that doesn't stop because it's not tied to necessarily an event, but the loss of an idealized condition. And when Eng and Han took that and put that in a racial perspective, they're speaking on Asian students, but it applies to a lot of minorities. You have what is called racial melancholia, meaning I am continually grieving the fact that I'm different. I'm grieving the fact that I don't feel like I belong. I am literally grieving the fact that I don't feel understood or have any sort of connection. And historically, my ancestors went through it. My grandparents went through it. So many people felt this. And now I have to be painfully aware that this doesn't seem like it's going to change. And if you know anything about grief, people don't function at the ideal capacity when they're grieving. Well, when you add racial melancholia, this unresolved grief because of my difference that I can't change, how powerless is that? And so they're likely to be very avoidant in the classroom or very aggressive, where they feel like they have to constantly defend themselves or prove themselves, which unfortunately is validated by what so many students are taught, this whole, I have to be twice as good to get half the recognition. Can you imagine that? That's exhausting and draining. And so a couple of interventions, really thinking about how can we include culturally supportive and welcoming language. In my PhD program, one of the best things for me, and again, even for my PhD program, I'm one of few Black faces in the room. And I'm also at a predominantly white institution. One of the beautiful things that they provided was the fact that I got to do an oral presentation. For me, part of my African-American culture is storytelling. Sometimes I can express things in a performance way, in a verbal oral communication way that can't necessarily be fully understood in a written way. You put me in this code switching mindset that reflects a lot of what the students that I serve are also experiencing. So maybe they can show you that they know the information, which is the whole point of education anyway, by maybe doing a different type of project. Maybe they can do a presentation instead of a 15-page paper. And if we're being honest, sometimes the presentation is more enjoyable than the paper anyway, because you see how much the student gets to pour themselves out. Allow me to show you all that I have and how wonderful of a person, how powerful of a person that I am. So really thinking about what are some different cultural practices that can be interweaved into the classroom experience, using what we're calling a cultural curiosity, meaning I'm not asking you to know everything about minority culture or this specific culture, but genuinely and authentically ask, be curious, allow my culture to be something of value and something that is treasured, not exploited. Really think about also including ethnic minority authors on the syllabi. There are so many authors who are just as powerful as some of our majority cultural authors. If I'm being honest, yes, they may have had the dominance in the culture in terms of they're more accessible, but I guarantee you, if you look up Black authors, Hispanic authors, Latino authors, Asian authors, you will find just as much powerful information as there is. And allow for multiple ways of learning and recall.
Michael, how is Indiana University or universities, how are they increasing their minority authors on their syllabi? How are they, I guess, building cultural curiosity in the classrooms? Is this something that's practiced, or how can we increase this happening more in college classrooms?
Absolutely, great question. So at Indiana University, we have what is called the Office of the Vice President for Multicultural Affairs, so OVP-DEMA, so the Diversity, Equity, and Multicultural Affairs, excuse me. And basically that is an entire campus-wide office that focuses on improving diversity in classrooms. They have what is called DEIJB practitioners, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, and belonging. So these are professionals who may become from a higher ed or a social service background and are really working all across campus to make sure that students feel heard, feel seen, and understood. Some of the best practices, and this will be on the slide later in the presentation, you can actually meet with DEI consultants who are specifically trained to help you systematically implement a lot of these best practices so that students, as well as clients, because it also translates into a clinical setting, to be more welcoming and engaging and overall really produce the outcomes that we all want. So Indiana University is doing that. And then on the clinical side, as the multicultural outreach coordinator, we have what is called our Let's Talk program, which is actually from the picture that you see, where students will come, and it is a multicultural drop-in support space. So students can actually talk with counselors in real time in a group setting about diversity issues, about cultural challenges, about mental health in a way that destigmatizes and really embraces who this student is and validates what they're going through. I was actually at two of them earlier this week. At one that we had 40 students. 40 students from all sorts of multicultural backgrounds, biracial, African-American, Latino, Hispanic, sororities, fraternities, individuals, freshmen, sophomores, seniors, grad students. 40 of them showed. And the very next day, we had another one, which is a part of our Let's Talk program, specifically chopping it up. And there were 30 students. So imagine being able to serve 70 students in a matter of 2 days, only costing me about 2 hours. 2 hours making 70 students feel seen. You can't beat that. And then we'll take it a step further and actually provide individual therapy at the various culture centers. So that way we will go to the home, or students have the ability to find therapists that are associated with these culture centers to have specific therapy that is customized to their culture.
Michael, do students always have to go to them, or how do you go to students? How do you identify, how do you flag students in need if maybe they're not speaking up for themselves?
Mm-hmm. So one of the ways, we have our outreach events. So I try to make myself, as well as the diversity outreach team, available all around campus. We will go to the culture centers and hold these Let's Talks. I'll reach out to some of the student leaders, so the fraternity leaders, student government leaders, and we will partner with them because they'll bring their students and their friends out, and then we'll have the mental health discussion there. And then from there, they have the ability to call CAPS, or they can email me directly, and they can have an intake. So they skip the consultation and go right to being seen by a therapist. And I have a diversity team that uses this as well. And even if they go to their culture center directors, the directors can also help them call the counseling center, mention that specific culture center, and then be paired with a therapist immediately. So it's a relatively easy and accessible system. And we also have what is called a fee waiver, so students can get therapy at a reduced rate, because we know the finances play a big part too. I've had students get as low as $5 a session or even as low as $0 a session. So we really are working to make sure that students feel connected and feel seen. And if we don't have the capacity to serve them, then part of my role, I'm very connected to other, specifically African-American, as well as other multicultural therapists around the city. So I will make referrals directly, and we'll talk about that in terms of either discharge, or if we don't have the capacity, we'll do whatever we can to make sure that the student gets what he, she, or they need. So effects and outcomes when using a lot of these cultural practices, the student has a deeper connection to him, her, or themselves. This is actually, again, from another outreach event where we really partnered with the student leaders, where they specifically set up the event and called my wife and I to come and speak. So as you can see, it's a nice, beautiful group. And when we think about this self-cohesion, it's really about helping the student no longer see themselves as good parts, meaning socially acceptable, or bad parts, meaning the rejectable parts, but more so just as a whole person. So really helping that self-cohesion, which opens up that mental capacity, which means, guess what? They can perform in the classroom. They have a deeper sense of belonging. They have a deeper sense of connection with themselves, as well as confidence. So now when they're met with the academic rigor, it's no longer an issue. It now mirrors the same comfort that they may have had back in high school. Or they have, as you can see, peers or community, family. It mirrors a lot of the healthy dynamics that really help them thrive. So improved intellectual and social engagement, greater appreciation for academic environments, improved mental well-being and overall capacity, greater quality of life. I've seen students who gone from feeling extremely socially anxious, to now hosting parties and thriving. One of my success stories started off extremely isolated because of COVID, and now has a job at a big time firm in our state in Indianapolis, and is thriving, has so many social relationships, loves himself, and even has been able to heal and mend relationships with his father, which was another big issue just due to the lack of mental health resources and conversations about mental health in Black communities. So plenty of success stories.
Michael, you kind of talked about how a lot of times that first semester on campus can be very difficult. And then by that sophomore, junior, senior year, there's a major growth in social wellness. Is there any mentor programs in place for upperclassmen, being able to bring along younger classmen, or how do you use students as a resource in developing student belonging?
Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of resources, at least at Indiana University in Bloomington. So the best way that I would suggest doing it, I've seen it work, because even when I was an undergrad, it's still going. The culture centers and the culture center directors will literally use graduate assistants to mentor seniors, and then have the seniors start mentoring freshmen. We have what is called, for the Neil Marshall Black Culture Center, a freshman pinning ceremony, where we celebrate and welcome first year students in the beginning of the semester, 2 weeks after school starts. There's also student organizations, Black Student Union, African Student Association, AAPI, so Asian American Pacific Islander Student Association. All those different student groups will actually partner with the culture centers to welcome first years and second year students, train them up as leaders, and then they'll have graduate assistants that will train up those seniors and upperclassmen, and then the culture center director will supervise that graduate assistant. So somebody is always pouring into another person to really create this family dynamic that provides a lot of safety and care. And we talk about how to get internships. That's why, I'll be honest, I joined my fraternity, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, to really make sure that a lot of these things that oftentimes go unnoticed will happen. Each fraternity and sorority, at least with MPHC and MCGC, have these initiatives, and we'll actually partner with the university to get money, funding, and different things to reach out to students. So there's tons of outreach. Also, having food at these activities and events will always bring students out as well. In regards to diversity resources, again, really think about, does your campus or your agency have any sort of culture centers or cultural offices? If you're, again, on campus, most campuses probably have a multicultural culture center. At Indiana University, we were given the opportunity to have separate culture centers. That way we can do more outreach, but a lot of centers or a lot of campuses do have the multicultural center. Please use that. I also found the Rochester Institute of Technology for Diversity Education. So they're really good about helping you include more diverse authors into your curriculum and into your overall classroom experience. And then I've also listed some personal friends of mine who do the DEI JB consulting. So you have Tribe Consulting, you have The Garden Consulting, you have Roy James Consulting, M. Johnson Diversity Consulting. And the reason that I have them listed is because they do consulting both for universities and agencies, as well as individual organizations that maybe want to help provide safe practices and diverse practices for their staff. So both on a professional as well as a university or elementary or whatever level of education. There are some very highly trained individuals. Often all of them are highly educated. Most have either a doctoral degree or a master's and have been in the field for quite some time. So I have their information there listed. And then, of course, my personal business that I do with my wife, we also do wellness consulting. So I focus a lot on mental health, and she focuses on the other 7 dimensions of wellness. And so we provide workshops, trainings, as well as any sort of conversation or public speaking and engagement in which we can really continue to do this work.
Michael, can you talk a little bit about IU's telehealth services?
And then Nate, did you have a question?
I'm sorry. Yeah, can you talk a little about IU's telehealth services?
Absolutely. So IU, we see students both in person at the culture centers or at the actual student health center. And then we also have a platform called Helo, which is a HIPAA compliant platform. We see students as easily as from their bedroom or their dorm room. I literally have students who will come and see me and they'll roll out of bed, oftentimes dealing with depression. So, hey, no problem. I'm just happy that you showed up. So we have that platform. We also use Zoom Health, which is HIPAA compliant as well. Sometimes technology fails you, so we have multiple options that we can do. And we also have crisis. We have emergency counselors, both in person and virtual. We have what is called protocol. So we can also see students in emergency crisis services 24/7, 365. So that is also a great resource. And now we are also getting what is called Timely MD or Timely Care, which will be an external group that we're also working to really maximize and grow the center's outreach to providing mental health services virtually for students. And even during the summer, students are still able to see us at the counseling center. The only thing that we ask, just due to license limitations, that they have to be in the state of Indiana. So as long as you're in the state of Indiana, I mean, I've had students be on the border of Kentucky and, go into a safe space, literally at the state line. And hey, we were able to provide the service, and then they were able to go on vacation. So we're here and we really want to help.
Michael, you talked about some of the cultural barriers that many students of color have as far as asking for help. I guess, have you noticed any, improvement? Are more students reaching out for help? Have you noticed? Or is it, I guess, what are the trends in students seeking help on a college campus?
So I will say, at least here at IU, And I'll even be bold enough to say all across Indiana, students are talking about mental health. COVID, unfortunately, with everything that came with it, one of the side effects, if you will, is that people are more comfortable or more willing, at least, to have conversations about mental health and mental health challenges. So from my perspective and what I've experienced, students are busting at the seams to get into therapy, especially with a lot of these outreaches, non-traditional ways of talking about therapy. I love to do more culturally sensitive therapy. So we'll do some workshops and I'll incorporate more pop culture references or music, anything that can really help them feel a sense of home or the secure base. And part of being in the fraternity, I've actually been, I like to make a joke, I'm on tour. So I'll be at I'll go to Ball State, I'll go to IUPUI, I'll go to, of course, IU Bloomington, and we'll really go with my wife and we'll travel the state, just speaking on mental health, doing different workshops. I know our fraternity has a state conference where we will talk about mental health. I'm also over a regional mental health committee that is a part of what we call districts. So it's 13 states and one chapter in Canada. And we'll do workshops on mental health for college brothers, for college communities, as well as recent graduates who, guess what, that's another adjustment phase. So there's so many invitations, if you will, and opportunities to speak on mental health. Students have no problem coming up to me both during our outreach as well as referring their friends. That is also a big trend. A lot of students are referring their friends to specific counselors. So if you were with my front desk staff, they would tell you we get a lot of phone calls asking for me as well as a lot of our counselors on our diversity outreach team. So they keep us really busy, but for good reason. And it's awesome to see the satisfaction, especially when a student feels so comfortable with you that they're now going to refer their friend to come and seek services. And even some of the maybe poor experiences that some students have had, these students are now going back saying, well, that may have been in the past, but they got something different going on at CAPS. You need to go. And so we have a lot of, as I call them, student ambassadors who are really taking charge. There's also a task force, which is separate from the counseling center, of students who are also going to each culture center on campus and holding mental health workshops and inviting us to come and speak and do different activities to make mental health a more tangible and accessible experience.
Thank you, Michael. We have one question. A lot of our audience is in K-12 arena. And so what advice would you give to a high school senior who may be nervous about fitting in their freshman year? Or what can high schools do, high school counselors, teachers do to really transition seniors to that freshman year so they won't necessarily have to hit them so hard on the college campus?
I would say a couple of things. One, normalize the fear, the anxiety, the discomfort. Normalize that it is an adjustment period. Also, part of that normalizing is sharing your own story. What was college like for you? But also, what are some other stories that you've heard? And even if it wasn't college, maybe adjusting to the job was difficult. But part of that connection is feeling that you're not alone in regards to making the big jump to college. That is really what they're asking for. And even if you're not from the same cultural background, the cultural background just allows you an easier way or an assumed way of connecting. What they're wanting from you is, hey, I want intimacy. I want you to share in a very raw, unfiltered way. What was your experience? So that way I know that I can do this, because they're looking to you as this stronger version maybe of themselves. And if they can take that relationship from you and internalize that, they're more likely to be self-confident. So normalize that, be honest about what college is really like in terms of some of the challenges, all the great stuff, help them identify resources at that university. So maybe you have somebody either like me or somebody in student support services actually come to your high school and speak on what are the available resources. If you make the resources available earlier on, students feel a different level and a higher level of control and autonomy.
Yeah, I've heard of schools having capstone projects where their seniors make almost slides of the college they're going to, and in those slides have all the phone numbers for the multicultural outreach. They have the phone numbers for the mental health facility. They have the room numbers. They have a map of the campus. So when they arrive on campus, they already have all of those numbers and in locations, so they're ready to find resources for help. Can you talk about transition programs a little bit? I know IU has groups. There's programs like Thrive. How important are how in the success of those programs, and if you notice a difference between students who are in those programs for students who are not?
Absolutely. So those programs are extremely important because they provide what I was mentioning on the other side, the secure base, meaning a place of reference that the student can use to essentially charge themselves back up or to feel a sense of belonging. Those programs help them make the adjustment to college. It gives them community. I know here, IU groups, that is when I say it is one of the most proud communities on campus, and the students have a deeper connection with themselves where no matter what they're going through, they have a higher level of support that students maybe like me, who I didn't get the chance to come through groups, have to find it on their own and have to build that community. Groups really allows them to feel that sense of belonging, that sense of safety, access to resources, because even if they don't know, they know they can go to their advisor. They have insights on how to navigate, and it just feels totally like a safety net in which they can begin to safely explore and build their own independence and self-efficacy. So those programs are extremely important.
There was a question, I don't know if you have it. Is there any data that supports that group has a better success rate for students who are not in groups?
I'm not quite sure in regards to the data,
Mhm.
but I would contact the group's director, Brother Sam Young, who would actually have probably access to that, because I'm not a part of that agency.
Sure.
I don't have access, but I'm sure that they have success rates though,
Well,
as well as dropout rates.
from your review, college and universities should at least explore programs that would be transition programs for their seniors to freshman students.
Mhm. And there's actually, I know through IU, there's quite a lot that have been founded by alumni. You have the Balfour Academy, which really helps them make that jump. You have IU groups, which is summer. So you have some students who have went through Balfour in terms of college prep, and then when they got to their senior year after graduation, went to groups to have college prep in terms of what does it mean to be a student, and then groups actually continues to support them through all 4 years. Same with Hudson and Holland, who has a summer enrichment program. And you can also get scholarships from 21st Century, which they have their own college prep, as well as Success. And now what a lot of these programs are doing, they're having my team, the diversity outreach team, actually come and speak during orientation, during admissions. Even the admissions counselors are now starting to reach out to us to actually provide parents with the same information to provide a holistic support as an intervention for really preventing dropout or a lack of belonging on campus.
Well, Michael, most of the questions, or actually all the questions that have been come up, I think we have addressed them. Uh, and so I want to thank you, for your knowledge, for your insight, for taking the time out and sharing with our community. Do you have any kind of last thoughts you want to share?
Absolutely. The last thought that I'll offer is just help doesn't have to hurt, but it will always heal. Continuing to find that motivation to reach out. And again, help is not always about having the same cultural background. It just simply means you're available.
No, that's awesome. I think something to definitely think about and chew on, as we leave today. And that's kind of want to bring it back to our overall goal. We've done a lot of work on bridging the gap and making college more accessible for students. But what's the point if we can't get them to succeed in college? What's the point if we can't get them to have a really sense of belonging, to find themselves, have academic success? And as we move forward, prioritizing mental health, especially for students who are in new environments, is something that I think we need to be very conscious of and continue to use our resources like Michael Whiteside. Um, Here's your references. Again, all the slides will be shared with everybody who attended today. We'll send an email out with a PDF of all the slides. I do want to highlight some upcoming events. We have a few webinars on the horizon, and with mental health, we have Overcoming the Stigma of Mental Health on April 26th. And our next CCR webinar will be May 11th. We'll be looking at college and career support for the undocumented, homeless, and foster youths in Indiana. We'll have a panel discussion. We have 3 great leaders in those fields. We'll be talking about what resources are available to support those students. To register for those, just go to iyI.org/events, and you'll find registration for those webinars. We also have a few virtual summits coming up. The first one, April 19th, is our SCAN virtual summit, which is Stop Child Abuse and Neglect. These are free virtual webinars and discussions. And the other one is our very popular Advancing Equity Summit. It's a 2-day virtual conference. Registration is open. You go to IYI upcoming events, you'll see the banner for it, and register for those. Those are great 2 days worth of wonderful sessions. But there's a lot more things at IYI, as you guys all know, a number of things that I didn't bring up, but if you get our newsletter, it comes out every Friday. In the newsletter, we highlight all the different things from SYPI conferences to our webinars, programs, all the things that are horizon you'll find there in our newsletter. So be sure to sign up for those. As we conclude, I want to thank all our attendees who joined us today. We appreciate your impact and value your voice and the choice you made to learn and partner with IYI. Later today, you will receive an email with a link to complete an evaluation of this webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know what you thought about today's presentation. If you don't receive the evaluation email, please check your junk email because it may have been directed there. Once you complete the evaluation, you will be redirected to your certificate of completion. Well, this concludes our presentation today. On behalf of Indiana Youth, thank you again for showing up today and serving our youth of Indiana. Thank you.